Gentlemen, a declaration by the representatives of the United States of America.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another,
we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights,
that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men.
And that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And for the support of this declaration,
It's one of the great ironies of American history.
on the protection
The man who led the revolution nearly lost his life fighting for that same British Empire 20 years before.
fortunes and our sacred honor.
On the eve of battle, George Washington couldn't help but recollect that earlier war.
Protection of divine providence.
I did not let the anniversary of this month pass without a grateful remembrance of the escape we had at the Meadows. And on the banks of the Monongahela.
That was the war that made him the leader he was. The French and Indian War. But the day it all began, there was nothing heroic about the father of his country. To be fair, Washington is only 22. Ambitious and a little naive, he doesn't realize he's about to become a pawn in a chess game he doesn't understand.
They are here.
Washington's orders are to drive the French from this contested part of the frontier, with force if necessary. He doesn't know these French soldiers are on a diplomatic mission. The eager young major doesn't take the time to find out what the French are after.
fire!
It's George Washington's first taste of battle, and he likes it.
I can, with truth, assure you that I heard the bullets whistle. Believe me, there was something charming in the sound.
The retreat cut off by Washington's Indian allies, the French surrender within minutes. Their officer sits wounded.
This is Ensign Joseph Coulon de Villiers de Jumonville. He's an envoy. Here's a letter from his commander.
I do not speak French.
Under the protocol of the day, Washington is responsible for the well-being of the wounded Frenchmen. But he soon realizes that this deep in the woods, different rules apply.
Tu n'es pas encore mort, mon père.
It turns out this Indian leader, known as the Half-King, has his own agenda. Within minutes, the Half-King's warriors plunder the French camp, scalping the dead and wounded before they leave. The massacre is not an outcome Washington expected, nor could he have foreseen the consequences. This incident will trigger an all-out war for North America that soon spreads around the world. We call it the French and Indian War. This is the story of a war that helped create a new nation no one could ever have predicted. This is the story of the war that made America. Spring 1752, 2 years before George Washington's battle in the woods. Speculators from Washington's native Virginia are coming to Pennsylvania to negotiate with the region's Indians for land. They're after a foothold in one of the most contested regions of North America. In the 1750s, Britain holds the East Coast, while Canada and the Mississippi Valley are dominated by the French. Between those two empires lies a giant prize called the Ohio Country, a region the size of France that is largely empty and up for grabs. Both France and Britain set their sights on one spot in particular, a strategic river junction called the Forks of the Ohio, where Pittsburgh stands today. But the Forks of the Ohio isn't theirs for the taking. The native people consider this their land and not something that can be traded or sold. But there is one Indian leader in the region who is willing to talk. The Half-King, the same man who will play such an important role in George Washington's life 2 years later.
Eswahe. Don't ever forget that any sign of friendship that we make to the English will not escape the French.
But the French seem weak, while the English traders give us goods when our hunters bring the skins.
In native tradition, women elders provide counsel for important decisions. For the Half-King, the stakes in this upcoming negotiation couldn't be higher. Most of the region's Indians prefer the French, but if the British offer him generous trade goods to distribute among his people, an alliance with Britain could put him in a position of power. It's a dangerous gamble, but the Half-King has few options. His people are refugees who have been driven out of their homelands in the East by tribal wars and European settlers. Diseases have devastated their numbers. Now 3,000 of them have made the Ohio Country their new homeland. They guard it jealously. But with the French encroaching from the north and the English from the east, the Half-King knows he must make some kind of accommodation.
Why are they firing?
Nothing to fear. It's their way of welcome. It's when they fire their guns at the end of the parley that you need to worry.
Parleys between Indians and whites are a fact of frontier life. And the rules are well established. Trade goods grease the wheels. the Virginians have brought a small fortune. The items are more than just gifts. Native people rely on European goods for their survival. Providing a steady supply of these necessities will go far toward securing Indian allies. And then there is wampum, crucial to any parley. Intricately woven belts and strings, encoded with messages of war, peace, and friendship. Until there is a ceremonial passing of the wampum, no negotiation would be complete. When it came to winning favor with the Ohio Valley Indians, the British had some catching up to do. Years of land swindles had left native peoples suspicious of British motives. The French, on the other hand, had traded with the Indian nations and fought beside Indian warriors for more than a century. So for the visiting Virginians, this parley was more than just closing a land deal. It was about winning these people over. The Half-King is playing a delicate diplomatic game between the British and the French. And to make it more complicated, he's not altogether his own master in this negotiation. The Half-King and his people are one of many Indian groups, and they are far from the most powerful. The dominant force in the Northeast is the Iroquois League, a coalition of 6 nations spread across northern New York. The Iroquois claim sovereignty over the Ohio country and all the Indians who lived there. Technically, they haven't authorized the Half-King to make an agreement with the British. So if he goes ahead and does it anyway, he'll be asserting his independence from the Iroquois League. In fact, he's called the Half-King because of his limited authority. But if he can strike a good deal with the British at this parley, it could make him a leader to be reckoned with.
Brethren, be assured that the King, our father, in purchasing your lands, had never any...
Why is it taking so long?
He is not...
The way it is with the Indians, there will be much talk and even more giving of gifts before the meat of the matter is addressed.
Kindly accept this belt as a symbol of our two peoples living together as one.
The talking goes on for more than a week. Finally, the Half-King agrees to let the Virginians build a small trading post at the Forks. With the 2 European empires encroaching on the Ohio country, the Half-King has chosen what seems the best of 2 bad options.
The French claim all the land on one side of the river, and the English claim everything on the other. If that be the case, I ask, where does the Indian land lie? We live in a country between, and therefore the land belongs to neither one nor to the other. But the great being above allowed it to be a place of residence for us.
Philip, how do we say farewell?
Ni wapete haleshilapwa.
Ni hapete halepshilepwa.
So the Virginians leave the parley, having secured the Half-King's support. He will back the English over the French. and he will allow the Virginians to return the following year to build their post at the forks of the Ohio River. The full effects of the Half-King's decision won't be felt for years to come. And one thing is certain: the French are not about to give up the forks without a fight. One look at the map shows why. The French already control Canada and the Great Lakes region. By building a string of outposts through the Ohio country, they could link their French forts in Canada with their Louisiana colony and keep the British bottled up on the East Coast. A memorandum by the Marquis de la Galissonière, governor of New France, urges action.
Si les progrès rapides des colonies anglaises n'est pas arrêté.
If the rapid progress of the English colonies be not arrested, they will possess in a short time formidable armaments on the continent of America. And if that happens, warns the Marquis, then all the other French colonies will fall to the British as well. La Galissonière was a visionary. He saw that the struggle for North America had global implications. If the French lost, France would be weakened in Europe as well. For Britain, the stakes were just as high. If it allowed France to dominate the Ohio country, the British colonies could never expand westward. So British authorities send an expedition to order the French to withdraw from the Ohio country. The man they picked to lead it? None other than the 21-year-old Virginian, George Washington. Washington is a natural choice. Brimming with ambition, imposingly tall, he is well connected and eager to make a name for himself. Washington draws his own map of the journey that will take him past the forks of the Ohio to Fort Le Boeuf near Lake Erie, a 500-mile journey that gets underway just as winter sets in. Along the route, Washington comes to a French base. The officer in charge gives a warm welcome to the young Virginian. But the French make it very clear they won't give in to his ultimatum.
That night, he invited us to sup with them. Soon, the wine, which they dosed themselves with freely, loosened their tongues.
With utmost charm, the officer lets him know the sentiment among the French in the region.
They told us that it was their absolute design to take possession of the Ohio, and by God, they would do it. For, though the English could raise 2 men to their 1, they knew our actions were too slow to prevent any undertaking of theirs.
Brushed off by the French, Washington starts back to Virginia in December 1753. His report on the mission goes all the way to London, where King George II hears of the young Virginian who had done his best, but failed to persuade the French to leave the Ohio Valley. The following spring, the Virginians take up the Half-King's offer to build a trading post at the forks of the Ohio. But it's not to be. Almost immediately, French troops forced the Virginians to surrender the forks and abandon their unfinished building. The Half-King is furious. By taking the forks, the French have humiliated him, and the inability of the English to fight back makes him look like he's backed the losing side. He calculates how to get even. It's the young George Washington who unwittingly offers him that chance. That's how Washington came to ambush the French, his first taste of battle. That same spring of 1754, Washington is on his way back to the Forks with orders to help the Virginians finish their trading post. When he learns he is too late, he makes plans to confront the French and take the Forks back. The Half-King agrees to be his ally. But Washington doesn't realize that the Indian leader has a complicated agenda of his own. If the Half-King orchestrates a confrontation between the British and the French, it will strengthen his own hand in the region. But why does the Half-King go further and kill the wounded Frenchman? It's an act of revenge for his humiliation at the Forks, and a message to the French to back off. And he knows the blame will fall on George Washington, not himself.
Tu n'es pas encore mort, mon père.
You are not dead yet, my father, says the Half-King. An ironic twist to the respectful term the Indians usually use for their French allies. Washington's skirmish alone probably would not have triggered a larger war. But the cold-blooded murder of their wounded officer, the French couldn't possibly let that go without a response. Within weeks, the brother of the slain Ensign Jumonville sets off in pursuit. Meanwhile, Washington has withdrawn his men to a large meadow. They build a crude stockade that the Virginians wryly name Fort Necessity. Washington expects the Half-King to help defend the fort. But the Indian leader has lost confidence in the young major.
This Washington, he is a good-natured man, but he has no experience. Always driving us to fight by his direction. And now he wants us to make a stand with him against the French. And that little thing upon the meadow.
Washington's only Indian ally leaves.
We have no choice. We will make our stand here.
The French have no such problems with their native allies. They arrive accompanied by 100 Shawnee, Mingo, and Delaware warriors.
About 9 o'clock on the 3rd of July, the enemy advanced with shouts and dismal Indian yells.
Washington intends to fight face-to-face in the field, European style. But the French and their Indian allies don't cooperate.
They then, from every little rising tree, bush, stump, and stone, kept up a golden, constant fire, which we returned as best we could. Till late in the afternoon, when there fell the most tremendous rain that can be conceived. Filled our trenches with water and wet not only the ammunition and the firelocks, but also the few stores that we had, leaving us only a few bayonets for defense.
By nightfall, the situation is hopeless. When the French commander offers terms for surrender, Washington signs the soggy document. Unable to read French, he relies on a Dutch officer to translate. It turns out that Jumonville's brother is taking a sweet revenge. Washington doesn't learn until later that the document includes a confession to the assassination of Ensign Jumonville. The morning after the battle, the victorious French allowed Washington to retreat towards Virginia with his wounded and tattered troops. Word of his defeat spread quickly. This was not the kind of fame the young Washington had been seeking. The date, oddly enough, was the 4th of July, 1754.